All right, let's dive into the world of Plato, specifically the Republic. But we're going beyond just like a basic intro to philosophy here. We're going to see if any of his sometimes like really radical ideas, um, well, if they still hold water today.
Yeah, what's so interesting about Plato is that his work isn't just like, some dusty old relic. His ideas have been both celebrated and condemned throughout history, and they tap into some of the deepest questions about how we should live and govern ourselves.
So before we get into all that, like the philosopher king stuff and the whole utopian republic thing, let's back up a sec. Who was this guy?
Well, Plato lived in ancient Athens from roughly 428 to 348 BC. He came from a really privileged background, an aristocratic family that was super involved in Athenian politics. Actually, his relatives claimed lineage back to Solon, the lawgiver, and even to Poseidon.
Whoa, hold on. Poseidon, like the sea god. That's a pretty impressive family tree. You'd think he would have just followed in those footsteps and jumped right into politics.
You would think, right. And early on, it seemed like that was the path he was going to take. But then a pivotal event happened, something that really shook his faith in the system.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. What happened?
Well, it was the execution of his mentor, Socrates, in 399 BC. Socrates was this amazing philosopher who challenged everything and encouraged people to think for themselves. And, that got him into a lot of trouble with the Athenian authorities. They saw him as, well, dangerous and put him on trial. Ultimately, he was sentenced to death.
Wow, that's heavy. I can't imagine seeing your mentor executed. That would really make you question everything. So is this where Plato starts thinking, like, there has to be a better way to organize society? A way that, like, values wisdom and justice over executing philosophers?
Exactly. And that's where the Republic comes in. It's his big vision for a better world, a blueprint for a society structured in a way that would hopefully prevent those kinds of injustices from happening again.
So the Republic, it's kind of like his masterpiece.
It is. And it covers, well, almost everything, like from politics and education to the nature of truth and reality.
Truth and reality, we're going there.
Oh, we're going there. But first, let's unpack his vision for an ideal society. It's definitely different from anything we see today.
Okay, lay it on me.
Yeah.
What did this utopian republic look like?
Okay, so imagine a society divided into three distinct classes, each with its own role and responsibilities. Like a chariot, you've got the charioteer who guides the horses that provide the power, and the chariot itself, which carries the load. So in Plato's ideal society, the rulers are like the charioteer, the auxiliaries are the horses, and the producers are the chariot.
I like that, the chariot analogy. So who are these rulers? Are we talking about like politicians or CEOs or what?
Not exactly. Plato had something way more radical in mind. He called them philosopher kings. And for him, these weren't just people who liked to think deep thoughts. They were individuals with a deep understanding of justice. And, this is important, the form of the good.
Well, hold on. Form of the good. You have to
Sure.
explain that one.
We will, don't worry. For now, just think of it as the ultimate source of truth and morality, the highest ideal that should guide all our actions.
Okay, so basically, forget charisma. Forget political skills. You need a PhD in philosophy to be in charge in Plato's world. I'm not sure the power-hungry types would be too happy about that.
Yeah, you're probably right. There's been a lot of debate over the centuries about whether that kind of system could actually work. But remember, Plato was really disillusioned with democracy after what happened to Socrates. He saw how easily it could lead to injustice. He wanted a system that put wisdom and virtue above all else.
I get it. But we can't just forget about the other two classes, right? We've got the auxiliaries, like the warriors, and then the producers.
Exactly. The auxiliaries were all about defending the state, courage, and strength. And then you had the producers, the farmers, the artisans, the merchants, everyone who provides for the material needs of society. Each class has its role. And for Plato, justice means everyone doing their part without overstepping their boundaries.
So everyone stays in their lane. Sounds like a recipe for a super organized society. Maybe a little too organized? But wait, didn't Plato have some pretty wild ideas about family and property? Like, no private stuff for the guardians.
You're remembering correctly. Plato proposed a system of communal living, specifically for the guardians, both the rulers and the auxiliaries. No private property, no individual family.
Wait, no family dinners? That's a bit much, even for, like, the sake of the state.
It's definitely a radical concept, but Plato believed that personal attachments and material possessions would distract the guardians from their duty. He thought it could lead to corruption and injustice.
So to serve the common good, you have to detach yourself from everything personal. That's a pretty radical idea.
It is, but that's Plato for you. He wasn't afraid to challenge conventional thinking.
Well, he's definitely given us a lot to think about already. but we've only just scratched the surface. Up next, we'll dive deeper into this form of the good and explore how all of Plato's ideas have stood the test of time. Okay, so before we went on that little tangent about family dinners and communal living, we were starting to talk about this form of the good thing and like what it actually means.
Right, we were getting to that. It's a key part of Plato's theory of forms, which can be a little, well, mind-bending, but also super insightful, especially when we think about truth and knowledge today.
Okay, so break it down for me. What are these forms?
So imagine like perfect blueprints, but they exist outside of our normal experiences. They're like the ideal version of something. Take beauty, for example. We see beautiful things all the time, a sunset, a painting, but for Plato, those are just reflections, imperfect copies of the true form of beauty.
So like there's this perfect version of everything, justice, truth, and everything we see is just like a flawed copy.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting, because this difference between the forms and the copies plays into how Plato saw knowledge versus opinion. Real knowledge is about understanding those perfect, eternal forms, while opinion is based on our limited, constantly changing perceptions.
Okay, so going back to the form of the good, it's like the ultimate blueprint for morality and truth.
Exactly. And Plato thought that understanding this form was like having a perfect moral compass. It would guide your actions and decisions. Remember, he wanted to create a truly just and ethical society. And for him, that all started with understanding this higher truth.
I'm seeing how that ties into the whole philosopher king idea.
Yeah.
They wouldn't just be making decisions based on, their opinions. They would be guided by this deeper understanding of what's truly good.
Exactly. The form of the good was like the North Star for Plato. Everything we do individually and as a society should be about getting closer to that ideal.
But is it even possible for us to really grasp this, the form of the good? It seems, well, pretty abstract.
It's definitely a challenge. Plato believed it was a lifelong pursuit, like a journey of intellectual and moral development. And even if we never perfectly understand it, the act of trying makes us better, more just people.
So it's about the journey, not the destination. How does this connect back to Plato's views on justice?
Well, for Plato, justice wasn't just about following laws or even punishing criminals. It was way deeper than that. It was about harmony and balance, both within individuals and in society as a whole.
Okay, tell me more about that.
He believed that justice means everyone doing what they're best suited for, using their natural talents and working together for the common good. Think back to his idea of the three classes.
Oh, right, the chariot.
Exactly. For Plato, justice meant each class playing its role without, stepping on anyone's toes. Rulers ruling wisely, auxiliaries defending bravely, producers providing diligently.
So no power-hungry leaders or lazy farmers allowed.
Pretty much. It's all about finding that balance,
Yeah.
where everyone contributes to the well-being of the whole. And this idea of balance, it applies to individuals too.
Oh, how so?
Plato believed that our souls have three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. Reason is the thinking part, the one that deliberates and seeks truth. Spirit is all about courage, ambition, honor, and appetite. Well, that's the part that wants stuff like food, pleasure, possessions.
So like the angel, the devil, and the I just want pizza parts of ourselves.
I like that. And just like with society, individual justice is about harmony between those parts. Reason should be in charge, guiding our actions. Spirit supports reason. And our appetites, well, those need to be kept in check.
Don't let your pizza cravings run your life.
Right. So a just person has a well-balanced soul, where reason leads them towards what's good and right.
I see how this all fits together. Justice, education, the forms. It's like a big philosophical system.
Exactly. He was a master at connecting all these ideas together. And the amazing thing is, it still makes people think today.
But not everyone's a fan of Plato. Right. I mean, some of his ideas seem a bit, well, maybe even dangerous.
Definitely. His ideas have been both praised and criticized throughout history. Some people see him as like this visionary who laid the groundwork for Western thought, while others think he was an elitist, and that his ideas could lead to suppressing individual freedom.
Wow, that's quite the range. What are some of the main criticisms?
One of the biggest comes from Karl Popper. He was a 20th century philosopher who saw Plato's ideal state as basically a blueprint for totalitarianism. Popper believed that the emphasis on social hierarchy and state control could lead to tyranny.
That's a pretty serious accusation. Why did he think that?
Well, He was really concerned about the philosopher king concept. He argued that even if we could find these super wise and virtuous people, giving them absolute power is just asking for trouble. Who would hold them accountable? What's to stop them from becoming corrupt?
Yes, that whole power corrupts thing.
Exactly. And Popper believed that any system that, shuts down debate and critical thinking is bad for society. He advocated for what he called the open society, where people can debate, share different views, and, allow for change and progress.
So was Popper saying that Plato was anti-democracy?
It's more complicated than that. Plato had definitely seen the flaws of Athenian democracy firsthand, and he wasn't sure the average person was equipped to make wise decisions, but he was really just looking for a better system, one that was guided by wisdom and reason, not just the whims of the crowd.
So like a balance between unchecked power and, mob rule.
Exactly. And whether you agree with his solutions or not, Plato's ideas make us grapple with these big questions about justice, leadership, and the kind of society we want.
So that's what's so cool about philosophy, isn't it? It's about asking the right questions and challenging what we think we know.
I agree. Plato's legacy isn't just his specific ideas. It's that he contributed to this ongoing conversation about how to live a good life and create a just world.
That's a great way to put it. All this talk about justice and ideal societies has really got me thinking, where do we go from here? How can we, apply Plato's ideas today? I guess that's what we'll explore in the last part of our deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about Plato and his ideas all episode, from his utopian republic and, those interesting thoughts on communal living, to the whole theory of forms and his big emphasis on justice.
It's been a lot, right? But even if we haven't all become enlightened philosopher kings, I think we've learned a lot from him.
For sure. But as we wrap things up, I'm thinking, what are the key takeaways from all of this? What can we actually take away from a philosopher who lived thousands of years ago? Can't all just be, interesting thought experiments.
You're right, it's not just theoretical. One of the biggest things Plato teaches us is the importance of seeking knowledge and wisdom, not just for ourselves, but for, the benefit of society. He really believed that being a good leader takes more than just power or being charismatic. It requires really understanding justice and ethics.
And that's something we see missing a lot today, right? Leaders who are focused on, short-term gains instead of the common good.
Exactly. And that connects to another big takeaway from Plato, his emphasis on education. For him, education wasn't just about learning job skills. It was about creating good citizens and wise leaders.
It makes you wonder if we're doing enough today to, prepare future generations to deal with all the ethical and societal challenges we're facing. Plato definitely makes you think about that.
He does. Another takeaway that I found interesting was his focus on justice as the foundation of a good society. He wasn't just talking about laws and punishments, but a deeper sense of harmony within ourselves and in our communities.
That idea of everyone contributing and working together, it's a powerful idea, even if it seems a little idealistic sometimes.
It is idealistic, but that's what I like about Plato. He makes us think bigger, to imagine a better world. And even if we never reach this perfect republic, just trying to get closer to those ideals is important.
Of course, we can't forget the criticisms of Plato, like the concerns about communal living and state control, which, they do raise some questions about freedom.
Yeah, those are valid concerns. And we have to remember that some of his ideas, if taken too far, could have negative consequences.
So where do we stand on Plato? Genius or, out-of-touch idealist? There's not really an easy answer.
No, there isn't. He was a product of his time, for sure. And some of his ideas reflect that. But the core principles he talked about, the pursuit of knowledge, the importance of justice, education, good leadership, those are things that are always relevant. They go beyond any specific culture or time period.
It's like he's giving us tools to think about those big questions. What makes a good leader? What does a just society look like? How do we live a good life?
Exactly, even if we disagree with some of his answers. Just thinking about his ideas makes us question our own beliefs and our assumptions about the world.
That's a great point. So as we finish up, I think it's safe to say that Plato, while sometimes a little difficult or even controversial, is still relevant to us today. He gives us a way to think critically about the world, to try to make things better, and maybe, just maybe, to understand that form of the good a little bit better.
And who knows, maybe that's enough. Like Plato said, the unexamined life is not worth living.
So everyone listening, go out there and examine your lives, read Plato, talk about his ideas, see what you can learn from him.
You might be surprised what you discover.
That's all for this deep dive into Plato. Thanks for joining us on this philosophical adventure. Until next time, Keep seeking knowledge and asking those big questions.